Hello and welcome back to another video. This is my third installment in the talent tree dives, the Zealot Preacher. We have a lot to cover, but before I get onto that, I just wanted to say I recently hit 1000 subscribers thanks to you guys, and I posted a little dedicated video to it. It's only 6 minutes, you can catch that in the top right corner. You'll have a blast, trust me. And just one last thing, following on from this video, I'm going to have some Zealot Preacher gameplay, as well as the final talent tree dive, the Veteran Sharpshooter. So drop a subscribe and give a like if you like this style of video, and stay tuned for those. Now without further ado, let's dive right into the Zealot Preacher talent tree. So, it looks like this talent tree is more defined, less hectic than the Psykers and the Ogrins. There are 3 very defined paths to go down, and there are also 3 intersecting parts in case you wanted to divert from whichever section you're going through. I think as the stun grenade and our old ultimate ability is down the left, I'm going to do what I did for the Ogrin and go down the right hand side, and I'll make my way over to the left hand side that way. Right, let's just jump right into it, shall we? First, we have our first passive buff, Backstabber, which gives 20% damage on melee backstab hits. That's pretty funky. I don't think I often see the backs of enemies, but maybe I do with Ogrins and larger enemies, maybe high priority targets like Maulers that are attacking teammates. So this could come in handy for those kind of enemies. And we've got Blood Redemption. The toughness you regain on melee kills is increased by 50%. This was on the old feat tree that we had for the Zealot Preacher, and it's the one that I used to run with. It's quite likely that I'll often choose or try to choose this passive buff for my builds in the future. And then we have alongside it Scourge, where melee critical hits apply bleed, causing damage over time, as well as hits on bleeding enemies granting 10% critical chance for 3 seconds, which stacks 3 times. This was also on the old feats tree for the Zealot Preacher as well. Anyone that's going for a high crit build, I would probably say that this is one of the most essential passive buffs to try and fit into your talent tree, as essentially it's going to keep that critical hit chance up for each enemies that you're hitting. And from what I've heard about crit hit builds, you get a lot of buffs stacked onto critical hits, so I think Scourge will probably be a necessary buff to go for. We've just got some toughness next up, which isn't too bad at all, before moving on to Second Wind, where we replenish 10% toughness on a successful dodge. Not too bad if you're dodging around. If you're hitting or being attacked by lots of enemies, this is going to come in handy, as it's quite easy to pull off successful dodges, especially in horde scenarios. Parallel to Second Wind, we have Enduring Faith, where we get plus 50% toughness damage reduction on critical hit for 4 seconds. So already we're stacking critical hit bonuses, so if we're getting a potential plus 30% crit hit chance from Scourge, that's only going to empower our Enduring Faith to give us continuous damage reduction, and 50% is a lot. We're going to take half damage to our toughness, and that's going to keep us alive for a lot of combat. And then we have our first Blitz, Blades of Faith. Throw a consecrated knife to deal high damage to a single enemy. Very effective against most enemies, less effective versus Carapace armor. Quick Throw. Killing elite and specialist enemies in melee replenishes 1 knife, and ammo boxes replenish knives. I think Quick Throw just means it's fast to throw it, and that's what I'm going to assume, and I'm sure I'll find out in just a moment. So yeah, without further ado, what I'm going to do is I'm going to give myself this lovely Blitz ability, and then I'm going to run out into... Oh, never... Oh wow, that does a little damage. I accidentally... In my head I was about to equip the knife, but instead I've thrown it, so... Yeah, it seems to do decent damage. Let's see if it does more to the head. It does. Okay, Rage is a very, very high damage resistance. And the headshot does quite a decent whack of damage. So that can really supplement your arsenal. Right, so we find out what it does to all of the specialists and elites, shall we? So we've got Trappers, 1-shot headshot kill, Bombers, 1-hit Tox Flamers, 1-shot kill, Snipers, 1-shot kill, Scab Flamers is a 1-shot kill, Poxhound is another 1-shot kill. If this kills the mutant in 1 hit, I'm going to be very, very stunned. I doubt it will. Oh my goodness, it does a decent whack of damage there. That's going to beautifully supplement a melee weapon in your mutant killing power. We move on to Rages, which do not get one shot. We've got Drag Shotgunners, is a one-shot kill. We've got Scab Shotgunners, oof, almost a one-shot kill, but not quite. And I think that's really, it's mindly annoying that actually it's so close to killing them. Like a sliver tiny HP there, but not the end of the world. I suppose it's because they're armoured units. We've got Scab Rages, which are obviously going to not take as much damage, but it's half health is a decent whack. It only takes a couple of hits after that to kill them. We'll ignore all of the basic enemy types, as we know it's going to kill all of those in one hit. So we've got Scab Gunners, which is almost a one-shot kill. And we've got Dreg Gunners as well, which is also almost a one-shot kill. I imagine Maulers are going to just eat these as if they mean absolutely nothing, and as we can see, yeah, it doesn't mean, it doesn't mean anything to him. So we shall move on to Crushers, which is yeah. Ooh, the critical hit does a decent whack, but I don't think you're going to throw those for critical hits. We've got Bulwarks. Okay, it does a respectable amount of damage, nothing really too big. Probably wouldn't want to waste it on the Bulwarks. And finally, we have Reapers, which take the same damage as Bulwarks. So you'll probably want to avoid using the knives on Ogren enemies in general, and just shove them onto specialists mainly, as it one-shot hits every single one except the mutant. Right, that's a lot better than I initially thought it was going to be, so we shall jump back into the talent tree and see what else it has for us to do. So next up we've got Toughness Damage Reduction, which is just a nice simple node. We get a bit of toughness damage reduction for ourselves there, before moving on to our next passive, which is Dance of Death. Minus 75% spread and minus 50% recoil for 3 seconds on successful dodge. So this will be handy for weapons, I imagine, such as auto guns. The bolt gun could benefit from this quite heavily, but those are really the only weapons I can think of off the top of my head that are going to benefit from that incredibly. I suppose the stub revolver as well, but it's probably not a passive buff that I would like to choose, so it's a bit unfortunate that I have to choose it to go down the right hand side, but you know, hopefully there isn't anything crazy here that I'm going to want to choose. We shall see. Next up we have Thy Wrath Be Swift. Enemy melee attacks cannot stun you. On taking damage, gain 15% movement speed for 2 seconds. That's probably something really good for yourself if you're surrounded by enemies. You know, you have a really high chance of being stunned in those scenarios and that situation, so Thy Wrath Be Swift means you're going to have a great time not being stunned and moving around the battlefield freely. Before we move down, we'll see what's parallel, and that is Good Balance, where a successful dodge grants plus 25% damage reduction for 1.5 seconds. I'm seeing a lot of passive buffs for dodging, so that's not too bad. It means you're going to be darting around. The more nimble you are, the more buffs you're getting, which isn't too shabby at all. And we have Ambuscade, plus 20% damage to ranged backstab attacks. So shooting things in the back of the head, which also doesn't happen too often, at least in my experience. Not something I'd probably choose myself, but we'll select it for now. And then parallel, we have Grievous Wounds, where we get plus 50% stagger on melee weak spot hits. So that's going to come really in handy for high priority targets such as Ragers, Crushers, Bulwarks, and Maulers, as it means if you're going to hit them on the head, you'll stop them in their tracks, and maybe it'll get us to the point where we can stop a lot of the attack animations as well, which could come really in handy for saving yourself and just killing them in general. Now we have our first aura, called Loner. Aww. You always count as being in at least 2 coherency. I think there was a lot of people thinking this was going to spawn many people that run off into the distance alone, as they count as 2 people now. But I imagine that's not going to be massive, but it definitely does help. I'll just jump into the lovely Sarcanium and test it for you and show exactly what little buff that gives you. So, as you can see, our toughness is regenerating as if we are in coherency with another teammate, but we're not, we're alone. So you're going to get a continuous toughness regeneration no matter where you are on the map, which could be quite handy, especially if you love to run off on your little solo mission, or maybe your team's just being too slow. And I think if you're speedrunning missions to get that contract turned in, and you're down in Malice or Sedition or Uprising, then the team's too slow, isn't it? You want to run ahead, it doesn't matter. You just want to complete the mission. But that's a nice little decent buff. You'll get toughness regeneration no matter where you are. Next up we've got a stamina boost where we get +1 stamina, and that's pretty decent because stamina is always good to play around with, especially when you have a lot of it. And shortly after Loner, we have our first ability, Shroudfield. Enter stealth for 3 seconds. While in stealth, gain +20% movement speed, +100% backstab damage, +100% finesse damage, and 100% critical chance. Stealth buffs, when I was reading about them before the patch, I was never really convinced that it would be a good thing to go for. I've never used any of the stealth mechanics in Vermintide 2, so stealth in a game like this is completely new to me. In a way, I'm still a little bit doubtful, as I'm not sure really how beneficial it's going to be, as you'd be using stealth to single out an individual enemy, but the map's throwing quite a lot of enemies towards you. I suppose it could come in handy for killing monstrosities, but I'll reserve my judgment, and I'll use it and try it for myself. So before testing it out in the Psychanium, I'll check out what its buffs cover. So the first one we have is Master Crafted Shroudfield, where the stealth duration is increased to 6 seconds. And parallel to that, we have Perfectionist, where Shroudfield now grants an additional +50% finesse damage, an additional +100% backstab damage, but it also increases ability cooldown by 100%. So its initial cooldown is 3 seconds, so we double in the cooldown to 6 seconds, or we get ourselves an extra 50% finesse damage and backstab damage, which would increase our totals to 200% backstab damage and 150% finesse damage. But we would increase our base cooldown to 60 seconds. If you were using this ability specifically to kill monstrosities, I think I would probably opt for Perfectionist. If you're just using it more wildly and generally in combat, you'd probably want to go for Master Crafted Shroudfield. For the purposes of testing, of course I'm going to go with Perfectionist, because who doesn't like that much more damage? And finally, we have Invigorating Revelation, which replenishes 40% toughness over 5 seconds upon leaving stealth, but you also gain 20% damage reduction as well. This passive ability modifier isn't as integral as the other two. It would come in handy if you've used stealth to save yourself from a picky situation, so you'll come out of that with some toughness, and you'll also get a little damage reduction boost as well to keep yourself alive. So in instances where the stealth is being used to rescue yourself from death, this will come in handy. We'll select it for now, and we shall jump into the Psychanium. Now, what's the most extreme scenario we can come up with? I think it has to be the Thunderhammer, surely. So this Thunderhammer has Thrust 4, so we're going to charge that up fully. It's also got Headtaker 4, so we'll get a little bit extra from that as well. But what we're going to do is we'll pop stealth, we'll charge it up fully, and we'll try and see what damage we can do. I might even spawn some monstrosities, see how crazy we can make it. Right, let's try the Crusher first, shall we? So we'll charge it up, we'll go into stealth, we'll get our thrust stacks to full, and we'll smash it in the face. And yeah, I think we're going to be doing a lot of damage. We might need to get a monstrosity. But first, we will try Mr. Reaper. Okay, just skipping the cooldown time there, as it's now a minute, so I've just saved you a minute of time. Okay, so let's see how much this is going to do to a Reaper. Obviously, it's going to one-shot it, but we'll do it for the memes. Activate that, get thrust stacks to full, smash it in the head, and he's dead. So the highest HP normal enemy is instantly killed. You know what? I think it's time to destroy some monstrosities with this weapon, don't you? I'll see you in a few seconds. Okay, here we are, and we'll have a lovely a lovely Plague Ogre. So, for reference, I think I can hit him once, and then we can get his HP on the screen. There we go. He took a knife to the knee. Oh dear. Right, so, for reference, this is Damnation, so Plague Ogrins have 60,000 HP as a base, I think Beast of Nurgle has 52,500 HP, and the Chaos Spawn, I do not know. If I can find it, I'll put it on the screen now. If I can't, oh well. Right, Plague Ogre in, we're going to get thrust up to full, and we're going to smash him in the head, and we'll see what happens. Here we go. Oh wow. Okay, so it's done a third of his HP, if not just over a third, which is pretty damn good, I'd say. And bear in mind, this is without any of the extra damage buffs, which I'm sure are probably inside of this skill tree as well. So, this is a lot of damage. I would say, in fact, no, I can guarantee you that this insta-kills weakened monstrosities. The Thunderhammer already did before, but if you use the stealth ability, you're guaranteed to instantly kill them with the Thunderhammer, as long as it has unyielding and thrust 4, of course. It might do it without, but I don't have a Thunderhammer that doesn't have them, so I can't show you that in this video. I just want to interject myself for a moment because I know you may have realised I've not been doing backstab hits, which is literally one of the main parts of this ability. So, here's what it does to an Ogrin from behind to the head. Absolutely ridiculous. Insanity. For testing purposes, I'll bring us a very horribly ugly Beast of Nurgle as well. And we'll shove a knife in his mouth. There we go, eat that, so we can get his HP on the board. And then, as with before, we're just going to pop our ability, get the Thunderhammer activated, thrust the full stacks, and oh my goodness. Oh my god. So, yeah, if you use the stealth ability, the Thunderhammer, you can one-shot Beast of Nurgle, and that's a normal one. This is not weakened, and it's damnation as well. That's insane. Wow, okay, so one-shotting Beasts of Nurgle, that's pretty intense, and extremely valuable, actually, so yeah, that's one thing you can do with that. Let's move on, shall we? We've got melee damage boost, which is just a 5% melee damage boost. Decent stuff. Before moving on to Sustained Assault, where we get 4% melee damage for 5 seconds on hitting an enemy with a melee attack, which stacks 5 times. So this was also something we used to have already, and it's essentially like Head Taker, but baked into the Zealot's passive ability. So it's going to be a really beautiful stacking damage bonus, and it's something that is pretty decent if you want to try and get it into your builds. Moving on, we've got a little bit more toughness damage reduction, before moving on to Swift Certainty, where our sprint speed is increased by 10%, in addition to always counting as dodging while sprinting, even if stamina is depleted. And parallel to Swift Certainty, we've got Pious Cut-Throat, which backstabs restore 20% ability cooldown. This cooldown boost is that's actually quite massive. So the 60 seconds that this is boosted to when we've got Perfectionist, if we just hit things in the back, we're going to be getting a lot of ability cooldown. That's 20%, so that's a fifth. Does that mean if you get 5 backstab kills, you've got... It does. Wow. You know what? We're going to have to try it, aren't we? Okay, so we've got 6 enemies. We're going to kill 1 with the ability, and then we'll kill the remaining 5 with just backstabs. And we'll see what the cooldown does in reaction to that. So without further ado, let's get it, shall we? There's 1, we've got a second one, we've got a third one, a fourth one, a fifth one, and then our 6th, we can use the ability again. Wow. Okay, it turns out the 60 seconds is not going to mean very much. Because you can get that ability back in a matter of seconds if you just kill normal enemies from behind. Wow, okay. Yeah, I would probably say that mastercrafted Shroudfield is not the thing to go for anymore in light of that. As that is pretty... yeah, wow. Okay, let's move on to our first keystone, Inexorable Judgement. Moving grants you momentum, which stacks 20 times. When you hit an enemy, you spend all momentum, gaining 1% melee attack speed, 1% ranged attack speed, and 1% damage per stack, which lasts 8 seconds. That's a total of 20% attack speed, ranged attack speed, and damage as soon as you hit an enemy. Alright, I think this could be pretty crazy. We'll just check out the other keystone modifiers before we try it out. Inebriate's Poise, where we gain 3 stacks of momentum on a successful dodge. Decent enough. And we've got Retributor's Stance, where we replenish 2% toughness for each spent stack of momentum. So a little bit of extra survivability for you on that end. I believe I have actually seen some pretty hilarious interactions. One of them is with the bolt gun. So, shout out Reginald. I'm going to show what that looks like. Because that could be pretty crazy. And then we will also... What's a fast weapon? Tactical axis fast. We'll do it with that as well. We have to hit an enemy, so we'll spawn ourselves a couple of enemies there. And yes, here we go. They're building the stacks. Yes, I see them. So we just hit an enemy. And then... we have a flurry of attacking. We'll see the difference when it runs out. Okay, yeah, wow. The difference was pretty crazy. So what we'll do is we will run around for a bit longer. And then we shall give him a hit and get our now machine gun out. That's amazing. Bear in mind, I'm sure there's loads of attack speed bonuses in here. This is the bolt gun fire rate without that, by the way. Wow. That is a massively fun interaction and could be incredibly devastating for those ugly heretics. Right, that is the end of the right-hand side. We're going to press our lovely E, reset all of those, and continue our path down the centre, where our first passive is Anoint in Blood, where up to 25% base range damage, reduced the further you are from the target. So I don't know the exact distances where the damage drop-off happens, but up to 25% range damage isn't anything to be scoffed at. If you're a true zealot, you're in the face of your enemy, you're getting that base damage stack, and you're doing a lot of damage. Great for shotguns, great for any gun really, because you want to be right there in the combat when you're a zealot, so it's a good one to have. Moving on to Fortitude in Fellowship, where we get plus 25% coherency toughness regeneration, which isn't so bad. That just means we're going to get more coherency buffs, and if you've run with Loner, you'll get a little bit of an extra boost with that as well. Might be worth spending down a couple of points to get there if you're running Loner. Parallel to that, we have Purge the Unclean, a popular phrase in 40k, where we get plus 20% increased damage against infested and unyielding enemies. So we just have some 50% toughness, which isn't so bad. We've got the Voice of Terror, which is the voice of home. For anyone who isn't well versed in Super 40k lore, Terror is just Earth, so it's our lovely homeland where it all originated from 40,000 years ago. Replenish 2.5% toughness on ranged kill. So that's not so bad if you're getting a lot of those ranged kills. I'd probably skip this one because 2.5% toughness isn't so bad. And I don't really personally see a lot of zealots focusing on ranged killing. I'd probably skip past that one, but I'll select it just because. We've got, parallel to that, Restoring Faith. On taking damage, heal 25% of that damage, which occurs over 5 seconds. So that's actually a really good buff, because you're going to be constantly healing a little bit. I wonder if that works to HP and not toughness. Essentially what that means is you could nullify the damage that enemies do, or basic enemies do, through toughness to your HP possibly, which could be a very good interaction. In fact, you know what? Let's try it out. So we've got one lovely newly infected unit. Here he comes. Let's see if we heal it. On the HP, we didn't take... Okay, so it does heal us, but it doesn't heal us through toughness. Yes, so that is confirmed. This ability only works if the hit takes you below 0 toughness, or you have no toughness already. It is pretty decent, it's going to keep you alive a little bit more, but you don't really want to be taking hits without toughness because they do a lot of damage. But it is a nice little decent buff to have. So we've got our next blitz, which is Immolation Grenade. I have seen this ability in combat, and it did confuse the hell out of me, and I've actually seen it confuse other teammates as well. I suppose it's just a natural thing about seeing a giant pit of fire and not wanting to run through it. Yeah, it is literally just the bomber's grenade. So you know what? We'll test it on the very man himself. You can get a bit of his own medicine. Eat that, son. Oh, it even looks like his grenade. Oh, wow. Jeez. That does a lot of damage. You get 3 of these. Oh my lord. Yeah, that's going to melt through hordes. We'll shove it into... we'll put it in the affected units, and we'll test the horde damage. Yeah, this is going to do a lot of damage to those things. So it's going to be a very, very, very powerful area denier. It's going to give you a lot of space to pick up downed friendlies as well, which is decent. And it doesn't harm you, so you can safely run straight through it. So yeah, Immolation Grenade, very, very good stuff. It's going to give you a lot of time to pick up your downed teammates, or just give yourself space so you can keep yourself alive. We've just got 15% toughness, which is decent enough, before getting the Emperor's Bullet, which gives our melee attacks plus 30% impact strength and plus 10% attack speed for 5 seconds after emptying our ranged weapon. That's going to give us a lot of buffs if we're a zealot who likes to switch a lot between our ranged weapon and our melee weapon. So, for example, you could use the stub revolver, push all the bullets into an enemy, and then we can start meleeing them instead of reloading straight away, which is decent enough. This could also work quite well with the bolt gun as well. So if you launch all of your bolts to weaken a nice crusher squad, which the game likes to spawn a lot of, you can get in there with your melee weapon and start dealing a lot of damage to them. We've got Unremitting. That just gives us a minus 10% sprint stamina cost, not too bad. And we've got Shield of Contempt. When you or an ally in coherency take damage, they gain a plus 75% damage reduction for 4 seconds, which triggers every 10 seconds. This is actually a really, really good support bonus for the team in coherency. It means that someone's always going to have, or at least someone's most of the time going to have, a lot of damage reduction, which 75% is essentially going to keep them invincible or alive for a long time, or alive completely for that 4-second duration, because most of the classes have damage reduction bonuses in the talent trees. So that's going to be an absolute beast of a support pick. We've got Hammer of Faith, which is just plus 30% impact strength. Probably not something I'd go for because I'm not really a big fan of pushing enemies around a lot, as it just displaces them so I can't kill them as fast. We'll select it for now. And we've got Sainted Gunslinger, where we get plus 3% reload speed on melee kill, which stacks 10 times. So this could work in tandem with the Emperor's Bullet, which we've just read. We could spend our entire clip, so say we've got the bolt gun for example, we're spending the entire clip out, get our melee weapon out after we've done that. With our extra impact strength and attack speed, we can attack all the enemies in front of us, get our reload speed stacks buffed up to 30%, switch to the ranged weapon, and then we can reload really quickly and restart that cycle. So that is actually a pretty decent little switcheroo bonus. And we've got Beacon of Purity, where you heal 1.5 corruption from the current wound for you and allies in coherency every 1 second. That's actually very, very good, especially if you're doing grimoire runs, or you're just in a hard mission condition, such as High Intensity Shock Troop or any of the crazy Maelstrom missions, because corruption can become quite a killer in those missions. So I'm just going to test out to see what exactly 1.5 corruption looks like in real terms. So we've got a lovely Beast of Nurgle candidate to really start, let's get him to spit on us so we get that corruption stacked. We'll take him away now, and we'll just step out of that. And we can just take a look at what exactly 1.5 corruption reduction does. And as you can see, that's actually huge. That means if anyone on the team gets pinned by a poxhound, is attacked by a mutant, is hit by a pox burster, is given loads of corruption by the Beast of Nurgle, we've got grimoires on the team, that's going to do a really, really, really big thing for the team there. Any teammate in coherency gets that buff, and so that is nothing to scoff at. That's an incredible utility to the team. Wow, I actually really want it. That's actually incredible. I think I might actually try this out in a build. But for now, we'll just move on to an extra damage reduction to toughness, not too shabby, before getting our next combat ability, which is Chorus of Spiritual Fortitude. Wield a holy relic that releases pulses of energy every 0.8 seconds. While channeling, allies in coherency have stun immunity and invulnerability. Each pulse replenishes 45% toughness to allies in coherency, If the ally is at full toughness, they instead gain plus 20% max toughness up to a total of 100. 60 seconds base cooldown. So this is the ultimate support ability for the Zealot. It's the only main support ability, and it is absolutely massive for keeping the team alive. I'm not sure on how long the ability lasts, so there's only one way to find out, of course, as we shall try it out. And I think this is one I'm really going to have to try out mainly in the game, so I think, I think I might actually base my first build try around this ability. We'll see. But before I test out how long it lasts, let's just check out the modifiers for it. So we've got Banishing Light, where each pulse from Chorus of Spiritual Fortitude also staggers and suppresses enemies. So the range increases with every pulse, so that's great. It's just the support is intensifying. We've got Holy Cause, where channeling 5 pulses grants 25% toughness damage reduction to you and allies in coherency, which lasts 10 seconds. And parallel to that, we've got Ecclesiarch's Call. I think I may have butchered the pronunciation, correct me in the comments. Channeling 5 pulses grants plus 15% damage to you and allies in coherency, which lasts 10 seconds. I'm going to assume that 5 pulses is the max amount of pulses, which would make this ability last, what, 4.2 seconds? No, I might go 4 seconds? Yeah, 4 seconds, maths. In that case, I would probably lean towards the damage personally, because we've just been made invincible. We've got plenty of time to get all of our resource back together, rally the team, so I'd rather kill everything much faster after that. So that's probably the pick I would go for. And just to confirm to myself how long it lasts, let's just get our lovely relic out and listen to the voice line as well. As I've never heard myself do it, and I've never really heard it in the game either yet, so here we go. Okay, so that was more than 5 pulses. Does last a little bit longer than I thought it would, and yeah, that's a pretty decent, that's a really good lifesaver. Yeah, it's something I'll probably try and build and test out properly. But for now, we'll just move on to our next operative modifier, which is just a little bit more toughness damage reduction. We really are starting to stack that toughness damage reduction in this tree, which is pretty nice. And we've got Faithful Frenzy, where we get plus 10% melee attack speed, which was a normal passive baked into the Zealot Preacher before patch 13. And then we've just got 10% health, which is a nice big bonus to our HP, before getting to what I think, at least for me, is a controversial little route, because they've made Martyrdom based on wounds. Oh, I need some water. Okay, so Phase Fortitude gives us plus 2 wounds, which on the face of it seems absolutely pointless. And we've got Martyr's Purpose, where we get 1% of damage taken is converted to ability cooldown, which could work very well if we've got a lot of damage reduction, so we can just keep beating down, get all of that damage turned into cooldown. So we come to our second keystone, Martyrdom. This ability used to be passive to the Zealot Preacher, and it used to work off HP and not wounds, but now each missing wound grants 8% melee damage, up to 9 missing wounds. Now, I'll tell you what, I'm wounded about this change. Nobody wants wounds, but I'm going to have to try it, aren't I? So I'll give this a try, and we'll see how that goes in the future. But essentially, you're just going to get a massive damage buff if you've got a lot of wounds to be missing. With the modifiers, we have I Shall Not Fall, where Martyrdom grants 5% toughness damage reduction per missing wound, which could help you become a survivor, not too bad. And Maniac, where it grants 4% attack speed for each missing wound as well. So this also used to be a standard passive buff into the Zealot Preacher. Yeah, we'll see where this goes. I'm not too pleased on the face of it with the change, but who knows, maybe wounds are meta now? We'll see. Now we can get our lovely E, reset all back to the start, and we have one more side to go before we complete our talent tree dive. So our first on the left hand side is Disdain, where we get plus 5% on our next melee attack for each enemy hit, which stacks 5 times. Now, this is just beautiful, isn't it? Where fatshark gives us all the information we need to know. They already don't give us the full story on a lot of these abilities, but plus 5% on my next melee attack? Plus 5%? What, sadness? Plus 5% smiles? Plus 5% damage reduction? Plus 5% damage? Plus 5% damage taken? It could be anything. We'll never know. I'm going to assume it's damage, which is... It would be crazy if this was damage. It would kind of nullify the other ability that I can't remember which ability that was now. Where is it? I know it's here somewhere. Was it on this side? There it is. Plus 4% melee damage, which stacks 5 times. Surely this isn't damage then. What is it? Plus 5% what? Is this toughness? We're going to try it. It must be toughness. There's no way this is damage. Smack me, bro. There we go. We've got a little bit of toughness reduced. Right. Okay, the stacks aren't coming in the bottom. Yeah, I don't know what that does. I'm sorry. Let me know in the comments if you know what this does, but I have absolutely no idea what disdain does. We'll move on. Enemies within, enemies without. Replenish 2.5% toughness per second while within 5 meters of at least 3 enemies. So this was also a normal passive from beforehand. If you're going with loner, that's going to start. It's going to be really nice. If you're alone with lots of enemies, you're going to get a little bit of extra toughness regeneration. Especially if you run with Fortitude in Fellowship alongside loner as well. That's going to be a lot of ticking toughness regeneration for you there. And we've just got 15 toughness, not too bad, before we get to Bleed for the Emperor, where damage that would take your health to the next wound is reduced by 50%. So that's not too bad. If you have a lot of wounds, that means you're going to get 50% damage reduction on those critical hits to your HP every so often. It's probably something I'd skip through, as it doesn't sound like it's super necessary. And parallel to that, we've got Vicious Offering, where we replenish 7.5% toughness on heavy attack kill. So this is good if you're using heavy attacks to kill large areas of enemies. So for example, the Crutus Thunderhammer. Now, it got a buff against hordes because it got a lot of cleave, so that could be quite good as you use the heavy attack combination to kill enemies. But for general use, it's pretty bad because we don't often use heavy attacks. I suppose with the new buffed chain weapons, you do use heavy attacks quite often. So yeah, maybe I'm getting too ahead of myself. Vicious Offering could be actually extremely powerful. And we get our lovely Sunstorm Grenade, which we had before, where you throw a grenade that stuns all enemies within its blast radius. This is an augmented version of Stun Grenade with a plus 50% blast radius. Yep, this is the one we had before. It's the one that all of us Legacy players are used to. So you get it, you drop it down, and all of the enemies within its radius. Oh my god, what's going on? I'm blind! Oh my god! Oh my god! Hope you enjoyed my rendition of that. Oh dear. But yeah, it does exactly what it says on the tin. It stuns enemies within its blast radius, which is a very powerful utility. We've just got 5% melee damage before moving on to 5% movement speed, so nice couple of buffs there. And this one actually has one less passive buff on this tree. Very interesting. Then we've got Duelist, where we get plus 50% weak spot and critical hit damage for 3 seconds on successful dodge. So that's more dodging passive bonuses we're getting. As we can see there, we're getting a lot more focus on critical hits down this side as well. And parallel to that, we've got Until Death, where fatal damage instead grants you invulnerability for 5 seconds, which can occur every 120 seconds. So this was one of the best abilities on the Zealot Preacher beforehand, and it's probably something I'm going to try to get in most of the builds I go for, as it's so lovely. You die, and you come back to life, so I'm going to assume that yep, it is. Holy Revenant, which is where Until Death ends, you regain health based upon the damage you dealt during Until Death to a maximum of 25% max health. Melee damage dealt heals for 3 times that amount. This essentially means that once you die, you don't die, you stay alive for 5 seconds, you've got a chance to flail as many melee hits into enemies as possible, and you're going to regain 75% of the damage you deal, which is absolutely massive. It can be absolutely life-saving and means you can play like an absolute maniac. If you want to go into combat straight into the faces of the enemy, you need this ability. It's absolutely beautiful. Trust me on that one. And then we've got our third and final aura, Benediction, where we get plus 15% damage reduction for toughness for you and allies in coherency. And this is an augmented version of the base aura, the Emperor's Will. We used to have this before, as just a normal passive buff for the Zealot Preacher. So it's good to see we've got that coming back as well. We've got just some more toughness for us, which is pretty decent, before going into Fury of the Faithful, which is dash forward, replenishing 50% toughness and gaining 20% attack speed for 10 seconds. Your next melee hit gains 25% and is guaranteed a critical hit. Again, with the... it gains 25% what? It doesn't tell us. I hope they fix this soon, because it'd be nice to have a bit of clarity on exactly what they do. I'm sure people already know. So drop your knowledge into the comments below, please, and teach me, because I don't know what plus 25% is. So we'll click that, and we've got Redoubled Zeal, where we get 2 charges of the ultimate ability, and this was a choice on the feat tree before. So this is the ability that you'll often hear in-game. You'll hear a Zealot Preacher shout aggressively as they charge forward, and it's all very lovely. And they have 2 charges, so you can run towards an enemy. It's great. Good stuff. It's a pretty good ability, especially if you want to charge into the face of the enemy, do massive damage. I suppose now that we have the stealth ability to do massive damage, it could make this one not as good, but it's still a decent ability. We've got just some suppression dealt, which is, this is the first time we've seen suppression on an operative modifier, which is not too bad. Do a little bit of extra suppression, but, you know, I prefer to do more damage or take less damage, but potatoes, potatoes. And we have our next passive, which is Punishment. Melee attacks that hit at least 3 enemies grant plus 30% impact strength for 5 seconds, which stacks 5 times. At max stacks, gain Uninterruptible. So we had this beforehand as well. Uninterruptible means essentially you cannot be stopped. You won't be staggered. You can just stand there, charge your weapon attacks. You won't be interrupted at all. It's kind of sad that you have to pick that to go down this route. As I said before, I don't really like stacking impact that much, as it just means you're knocking around enemies more rather than killing them. And it's a lot easier to kill groups of enemies if they're smushed together rather than knocked down, spread apart on the floor. It's a little bit of a punishment to have to pick punishment to go down. But we have 5% movement speed next, before moving on to the Master's Retribution, where we knock back the attacker on taking a melee hit, which has a 10-second cooldown. Yeah, it's not something I'd choose personally. It doesn't sound amazing off the face of it. So, yeah, obviously I might be getting ahead of myself. It might be amazing, but on paper, I'd avoid this. Doesn't sound like it benefits me that much. And we have another ability modifier, which is Invocation of Death, where melee critical hits reduce combat ability cooldown by 1.5 seconds. Again, we had this one before, so if you're stacking them crit hits, you're going to be able to get your combat ability up a lot more. Before our final keystone, which is Blazing Piety. Plus 15% critical hit chance for 8 seconds when in Fury. And Fury is triggered when 25 enemies have died within 25 meters. That's quite a lot of enemies. I suppose you'll have this every horde, but I suppose on higher difficulties you go through enemies constantly, so you might have Fury triggered up quite often, so you're going to have that plus 50%. So you're going to have that plus 15% critical chance up quite a lot. Pretty decent. Let's see how it's buffed. We can only go down either side of this, so let's see which one's better. Down the left we have Stalwart, which is triggering Fury, replenishes 50% toughness. Moving on to Infectious Zeal, where allies in coherency gain plus 33% of the critical hit chance gained by Blazing Piety. So it means the team's going to get a lot of crit chance as well, by 33% a third of that, so you're going to get around 5% crit hit chance every time it triggers for the team. Yeah, not amazing, not bad, it's okay. Down the right hand side we've got Fury Rising, where critical hits also count up towards triggering Fury. I think already I'm erring towards this side because I'd rather keep it activating for myself a lot more. So if we're already stacking crits and we're doing more crits, we're going to trigger it more and the cycle's going to continue. So yeah, right hand side for me every single time. And finally, we've got Righteous Warrior, where we get plus 10% critical hit chance from Blazing Piety. So every time we trigger it, we get plus 25% crit hit chance. Very, very nice. Definitely, if you're going to the Blazing Piety keystone, pick the right hand side. It's much, much better than the left hand side. And that actually brings us to the end of the Zealot Preacher's skill tree dive. So there is a lot in this one. I think this one's probably actually going to be, at least for me, the most complicated to build. because a lot of the crit bonuses are split across everywhere, so you can't really... In my head, you're like, yeah, I want to stack all the crit in one go, but you can't. So that's mildly sad, but not the end of the world. We'll press E, so we refresh all of that. And yeah, wow. This one's going to be a lot of good fun to use. So, on my other talent tree dives, I've quickly drafted a quick build and tested a little few bits out, but this time what I'm going to do is I've got a lot of ideas in my head. I'm going to jump into gameplay, get recordings of those, and share my beautiful builds with you on separate videos in the future. But for now, that's the end of the Zealot Preacher talent tree dive. I hope you enjoyed it. It has a lot of the things in here. There's a couple of bits like the Martyrdom change, which I'm not really happy with, but I suppose it's not the end of the world. The stealth is incredibly powerful. I got way ahead of myself when I wasn't sure about it. It's proved me wrong, so that could be incredibly good in the game. And yeah, my next talent tree dive and last talent tree dive, the Veteran Sharpshooter, should be coming out before the end of this week, and you'll have some Zealot Preacher builds and gameplay from me coming up as well. So drop a subscribe if you'd like to stay tuned for that, and I will see you on the next video. Goodbye!